All right. Welcome to Vector 2018. This is the first day. And I guess I'll give a couple quick announcements. We are extremely happy to be able to do this again for the fourth year now. And don't see John here, but I see Amanda in here. And Amanda is crucial to putting this whole thing on. She's awesome. John Meister's awesome as well. And he's not in this room. He's doing something else. But welcome to EKU. Welcome to Vector, and this is it's a really good time. It's fun to, I don't know, we like games, right? So we want to talk about games, so that's what we're going to do. So we are very fortunate. We actually have two of our tomorrow's keynotes here today, and we get to have a little more informal time with them. So I'll kind of direct this. We're calling it a panel. I'll ask a few questions, and I'll let them, I will not cut them off. They can talk as long as they want. And if you have questions that come up, there'll be time at the end that you can ask questions, and we'll. I may cut questions down depending on, but we'll see. Okay, so we're very fortunate here to have Lena Raine and Jake Sones, and I think we'll just go ahead and straight into a couple of questions. Well, so what I'll do, would each of you be okay kind of talking a little bit about background and how you got in the industry? Lena, we can start with you.
Sure. Hi. So I'm Lena. I am a composer, independent composer and writer. I have been doing industry stuff for about 12 years now. I was working full-time as a game designer. I spent about 6-7 years working at ArenaNet, working on Guild Wars 2 and its two sequels. It's two expansions. And then I also worked as a level designer on Far Cry 5. And just recently went fully independent as a game composer. Did the soundtrack to Celeste, which came out and apparently a lot of people like, so that's cool. And have also done soundtracks for games like Hackmud, and a game that came out a number of years ago called Dead State, and am currently working on my own sort of self-created game, interactive novel called Escape, and I'm hoping to release that next month or so. So, yeah, that's generally.
Hi, my name is Jake Sones. I'm a game designer. I've been doing this for 18 years now. I started back in 1999 as a game master on EverQuest. I did that for a few years. Then they had an apprenticeship program that I got in on, and I started learning game design from some of the other game designers on EverQuest. And then I started working on the PlayStation 2 version of EverQuest. So I did that, and then the expansion, as MMOs go. And then I did a Diablo clone called Champions of Norath, and the sequel to that. I was up in Seattle, actually. Oh, nice. Lived out of a hotel for 6 months. It was super fun. And then after that, I moved up to Insomniac. I worked on a bunch of Ratchet & Clank games. I did UI design and game design for them, as well as the Resistance series. And after that, I went down to Blizzard. I worked on Diablo 3 as a level designer. I designed most of Act 3 in that game. After that, I was a lead designer at Sony Online working on a game called EverQuest Next, or Landmark. I was working on all the building and interacting, how you build things in 3D, and like teaching people who have never built in 3D how to do that. It was kind of fun. And then after that, I started my own company. I've been doing some consulting work. I worked for PlayStation and for Psyonix. I was helping them figure out what they were going to make after Rocket League, which was a really fun gig. And I made a couple mobile games, wrapping up my second mobile game right now. It's called Squealings. It's a puzzle game about spreading happiness.
Nice.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. All right.
I was long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. This is really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit broad here.
Sure.
What keeps you in the industry? All right, so that's maybe take a second or two. Obviously, money is a reasonable answer, but
No, it's not. I could be making so
Okay,
much
go
more
ahead,
money
Jay.
doing
Go ahead.
something else.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So go ahead.
I mean, I love video games, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it's like the puzzle solving of making the game, like trying to figure out like how all the pieces come together
Yeah.
is the most fun I have, and it's fun to do that in an environment that is like just focused on making sure other people are having fun, like that, and then like having somebody else play the game and like experience it and like having that feedback from what they experienced from something I made that's like super fun for me personally.
Yeah. For me, it definitely like it kind of stems back to like what I've been doing sort of like my whole life. Like I love storytelling. Like that's sort of my drive for working on games. And so that's like why I went to school to be a composer. Like I love telling stories through music, through writing, through all sorts of things. And so I think games are just a really strong medium to be, to tell stories, to sort of allow storytelling to be an experiential thing, and to do that through interactivity, I think is really fun. And I just, that's what I grew up doing. Like I experienced all of these sort of other stories from a whole bunch of different perspectives that I wouldn't have experienced otherwise, that just, reading something or listening to something wouldn't have given me the same experience. And so that's definitely what keeps me coming back to it, is like, telling more stories and sort of creating those experiences. It's really important to me.
I'll follow up on that. Do you feel like that's harder or easier now? Like within the past 5 years, changes in the industry. Do you feel like things are getting easier in those respects?
I mean, there's definitely a lot more like sort of viable venues to do that in. I feel like, with a lot more focus on bolstering indie development and stuff, like that's really sort of allowed for smaller creators to take a stage and more diverse creators to take a stage and be recognized and sort of have those stories told, whereas it's been a very sort of select group of people that have been sort of getting the main attention before.
Yeah.
I have a similar answer. I think it's both easier and harder. I think
Yeah.
it's easier to make things, but it's harder to get that in front of people. Just
Yeah, because there's so much
there's
more
so
now
much more,
also.
Yeah.
Sure. I guess we could keep going with. I'll stay on.
Yeah.
I guess as far as looking back some, how important is it to have a network around you of folks? If you could each speak to that, I guess.
Yeah,
Lena.
well, I mean, I'd say definitely important. It's that's how I got, that's how I got into doing my own independent stuff in the first place. Was, people talk about like the importance of networking, but really it was just like making friends, right? Like it's getting out to events and like this one, and meeting people, and it's your friends that you work best with, and so having that network of people around you to you're working on something and like someone that can bring something to that. That's how games get made, and especially with smaller teams, like that's it's such a good thing to be able to fall back on.
Yeah. I feel like networking, like as a word, kind of feels like a dirty word.
Yeah,
But like at the
it's
end
very
of the day,
business.
like you said, it's just making friends.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like meeting people, and then like the other thing is like it's really hard to make a game by yourself. Like you have to do so many different things.
Yeah, it's possible. It just takes a long time and a lot of personal energy.
Right, and like the odds of you being really, really good at every aspect of game making it's really rare to find somebody who's good at everything. So
Yeah.
finding people to work with, and then finding people that like have done what you've done in the past or have done what you're thinking about doing, and ask them like, hey, what did you run into? Like what worked, what didn't work is super helpful.
And just putting your stuff out there too is like that's one of the things I think that's kind of defined this like current generation of independent development, is like like people on Twitter like just putting GIFs of their game out there, and just like getting people to like give that feedback, like even when you've just got like a cool animation or something, like, and then also just being able to like reach out and be like, hey, I'm running into issues with this, and like you've got this whole community of people that can just kind of like get in there and be like, oh, this is what I did, maybe this would help or something like that.
Yeah, I think you kind of started touching on like signal boosting. Just,
Yeah.
like once you have something if you know people who can share it with more people, it's awesome. And I feel like
Yeah.
signal boosting is another one of those things that sounds like a marketing term. It sounds like
Yeah.
soulless, but it's like, I want more people to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Could you give any specific advice to folks who would like to be signal boosted as far as reaching someone who, obviously maybe would have more reach, right? Any specific examples or ways to approach that?
I don't have any specific examples, but I'd like, as a general rule, I'd say like, be nice, like be like,
Yeah.
like don't,
a good one.
Yeah, and don't open up with, hi, my name is whatever, can you tell all the people about this? But
Right.
more like, create a rapport before
Yeah.
asking for favors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a thing. Like if you're going into a conversation like that, kind of expecting a lot, then that's not how to sort of initiate something like that. It's kind of like, I don't know. On the flip side of it, also, it's kind of like just having a continual stream of like what you're doing, like just putting everything out there, like having either a Twitter feed or blog or whatever, like, having this sort of record of like, here's all this stuff that I've been working on, and that creates sort of, not just like a curated list of it, but like, here's all my stuff, and just putting, having like, for music, like having a SoundCloud is just like, here's a bunch of works in progress, like people can just check that out, and just, find something to latch on to, I think.
So then when your post goes viral, you have
Yeah.
something to refer to.
Exactly. And I mean, there's no trick to going viral.
Right.
Like it's because the internet's weird.
Yeah.
The internet is really weird, and like the dumbest things will get spread around. So it's completely random. I feel like. Your meme will go viral before your work does, but
Well, you see that a lot, right? You see
Yeah.
like a lot of people like post a random thing and then like in the follow up to their own.
So since you're
tweet-
here,
exactly.
check out,
Yeah. But I
check
think
out my
it's-
mixtape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is important to
Yeah.
have that stuff ready to go, though. Like,
Sure.
For that reason and
Yeah.
for others. Like if somebody sees like one thing that you posted and they want to see more, it's nice to like have some place where somebody can go and check it out and find
Yeah.
out more about what it is you're doing.
Yeah, my advice is not to just constantly shitpost and then like follow up with your work,
Right,
but
right.
that has worked.
You're good at shit posting.
Yeah. I think it's on your resume, right?
Yeah.
I had a viral tweet back in 2012.
I'm trying to think. So yeah, it's got me distracted. I'm thinking. Let's see. I'm thinking. Do you put viral tweets on a resume? I guess I
No.
would. No, you don't think so? Okay.
No, I don't think that comes up well.
That was being facetious.
It depends on how good it was. Maybe. I don't know. Okay.
Like I am Star Wars kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be
People
here.
making a career off of that.
Yeah,
Yeah. I guess the other thing that comes up, so we always have, in Kentucky, we'll have a lot of students, or even this area, the constant question of, do I move? Do I have to move to be successful? Should I move to Southern California? Should I move, West Coast, East Coast? I guess just personal opinions are fine. I'm just
Yeah.
kind of curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really speak to personal experience because I grew up in Seattle. I've lived there pretty much my whole life. I moved to Montreal for a year and came back. And so I don't know necessarily firsthand, but like the internet is powerful. Like people have been collaborating on things so much more just from where they are, and then traveling to kind of like meet up and do, more sort of closer knit things. But like, I don't think it's necessary, but it's nice if you want to have that sort of like just being able to hang out in person, being able to it works for different people.
Sure.
I feel like it depends on what kind of person you are also. Like if you're extremely outgoing and social, like yeah, get out there, like go to sort of meetups and all that kind of stuff in like a larger community. But if you work well online and are just kind of like an introvert like myself, like you can just kind of put yourself out there on the internet and just thrive that way too.
I think it depends a lot on your career goals as well.
Yeah.
Like if you want to stay indie, I think it's easier to stay where you are. That's obviously more affordable.
Yeah.
And you can find a lot of people who are also in the same situation where they want to work where they live and work remotely. if your goal is to do AAA, you're gonna have to move.
Yeah, that's where the studios are.
Yeah, you got to go where the work is.
Yeah.
That being said, you can jump back and forth between AAA and indie.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's actually showing his game here. We worked together in LA, and he moved back to Indiana after working at Insomniac for, I think he was there for like 6 years or something. I don't know his resume, but he's got a game he's showing here called Pig Eat Ball. It's super fun. It's a little indie game, and he's making it work. And that's awesome.
I'll do one more question, and then we'll probably open it up. Hopefully,
Sure.
we got a few questions out here. Hopefully, okay. So one of the other things I hear a lot, and I think we already talked about this just a little quick, Jake. Critiquing each other. Talk about it's one thing to do it online, but
Yeah.
as well as face to face. And I think it kind of builds with networking as well and being friends, right? I guess any advice and or personal examples if you have any, but just advice on how to be constructive while also hopefully that person would appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on critiquing, I guess?
Yeah. I think the first thing to keep in mind is that what you're looking at is something somebody spent a lot of time on.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I know when I work, I get like hyper-focused on like one thing, and the thing that somebody's going to critique might not necessarily be the one thing that I focused on. And so I think it's kind of important to look at like the big picture of what it is that you're experiencing, that you're critiquing, and kind of like find something unique about it, find something that's interesting about it, and like comment on that, and kind of build from there, and then like talk to the person, be like what's your goal here? Like what's the thing that you want to highlight, and then work with them to figure out like how to highlight that best. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, that's the hardest part, I think, about any sort of critique is like when you're on the receiving end, to sort of flip it around a bit, like you're always trying to find, dig through what was actually said and find the things that you need to improve from that. And so I think as someone that's giving critique, like being able to kind of hover, sort of like put it not necessarily in the like this is bad and needs to be improved, but like this is something that I had trouble with or whatever,
Right,
and
yeah.
and exploring some options of maybe it could be done in certain different ways, and not saying this is the definitive thing you need to do, but giving options and sort of letting it, putting the ball back in their court, so to speak, and giving them the control to make their decision on the choice, but not demanding a certain thing, because obviously you're not making the game. Like, if you were the director of this project, you'd be coming in and sort of, doing sort of a similar sort of thing and maybe taking a little more control, but like ultimately it's not your project. So you need to kind of do it in a way that they can respond to well.
Yeah, I like the way that you were talking about like making it about your experience, like playing the game.
Yeah.
So it's like, I personally had this issue. Like
Yeah.
I was confused when this happened,
Right.
or I don't understand why that occurred.
Yeah.
And framing it more like that and less like, this is total crap.
Yeah, it's like not making definitive statements
Right,
about it,
right,
but
right.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Questions from the floor? I will probably repeat a question just so we can hear it on the camera recording.
Personally, what art style do you gravitate towards more?
Okay.
Most?
So personally, what art style do you gravitate toward the most?
Oh goodness. I don't know. Like I like. That's a hard question.
I can take it if you want to think
Go
about
for it.
it.
I'll think about it.
I try to stay away from hyper-realistic just
Yeah.
because it doesn't age well, and it's really difficult to like have it come across like looking realistic. Also, that type of art style requires like a lot of artists who are very specific at doing that specific thing.
Yeah.
So I tend to stick to more stylized things. And just personally, like I've played a lot of games that are like really dark and dreary and gory, and I'm kind of over it.
Yeah.
But that's just me, you know, like there's definitely a lot of people who like that kind of moody atmosphere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tend to gravitate towards like happier, like brighter colored things.
Yeah, for me, now that I've had a chance to reflect on my own opinions, I like limited palettes a lot. I really love doing things with as little as possible. So like simple shapes, simple, whether it's pixel art, whether it's just like low poly stuff. Like I love just kind of being expressive with as sort of few materials as possible, because I'm, at heart, I'm a minimalist, in my music and in any sort of thing that I create. And so I think I love doing less, or more with less, rather.
That's how I feel about game design.
Yeah.
I want to make my
Yeah.
games have the fewest number of moving parts, but have
Oh,
them
yeah.
like work together in a way that just has like a lot of uses.
Definitely.
I consider myself a design minimalist,
Yeah.
not a visual one.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Whenever you're receiving constructive criticism, is it a bad thing if they don't talk about the one thing you spent a lot of time on?
So I'll repeat that. So when receiving criticism, is it bad if they don't talk about or even discuss at all the thing that you spent a ton of time on?
I don't think it's bad at all, because if you're receiving feedback on something, a lot of times the person giving critique will be targeting on the things that they want to improve. And so ultimately, it would be really nice if someone giving critique would be like, this was amazing, right? Especially if you spend a lot of time on something, you want that rewarded. But because it's not mentioned, I don't think means that it's bad. It means that that was good, and like they didn't need to comment on that specifically. It depends on the setting for the critique also. Like if it's a shorter sort of thing, like they need to get sort of the things that they would like to see improved, but not necessarily touching specifically on like the things that were really, really good.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Like I used to do UI design, and my goal was just always never get mentioned, because if they're mentioning UI, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's like it's in
Blend
the way.
in, yeah.
So basically, if you don't get any comments, it tends to be a good thing. The other thing is like people might not realize how much work went into the thing that you focused on, because they're not experienced with that specific thing. They don't know how
Yeah.
difficult it is to do, or how much time you put into it.
Yeah.
It's also true with like iterations on something. It might not be apparent that like it took 500 iterations to get to this point, and now it works. Now this thing that was bad is just no longer in the way anymore, and people might not notice it because it's not in the way.
Yeah, I feel like there's a separation between like the amount of work that you put into something and the amount that it's noticed.
Yeah.
And for a lot of aspects of game design, it really, or any sort of design really, it's like the more work you put in, like the less.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not sure where that thought was going, but yeah, what you said.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if it's
Yeah.
like a longer critique, sometimes it's fun to just talk about like the path that you took to get here, and talk about the thing that you spent a lot of time on, because
Yeah.
that might open up a conversation to talk more about it, or to kind of talk about the learning experience that you went through to get to that point.
Yeah. And if you do that, though, like, be prepared for them to notice new things about that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
That thing you're bringing up. Because if you're bringing it up, then that's a cue to them that they need to comment on it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that definitely opens that door.
yeah, yeah.
Hey guys, first I just want to say you both have worked on games that I really love today. And my question has to do with AAA studios, and we'll let you talk about it a little bit, but freelance work. What are your thoughts on AAA studios hiring freelance concept artists from who want to be local, who want to stay where they are?
Okay, so what are your thoughts on AAA studios hiring freelance concept artists remotely, right, or staying where they are?
I haven't experienced that personally, but it seems like that would be feasible, because I feel like you definitely need to be a part of like the conversations about the art that they're requesting,
Yeah.
and I don't think that would necessarily specifically require you being on site. But I feel like in order to, like, I feel like that's not like the normal way that studios work, so I feel like you have to have like some extenuating circumstance to make them think about it. Either be totally kick-ass and refuse to move, or just be exactly what they're looking for. I think most studios want everyone on site just because it helps with culture, it helps with like the idea, like germination, where like just interacting with people helps move things forward.
Yeah, I think it also kind of depends on like what the studio makeup
Right,
is.
yeah.
Also, like, because I know like here in the U.S. is one thing, but also like in Japan, like it's a very common thing to have like concept groups, right, that get brought in to do concept art. And it'll be like a whole team. There's one specifically that worked on like Nier Automata and a whole bunch of other different games, and like the Grand Blue Fantasy series. Like they're a specific concept design group, and so they get contracted to provide concept art for other projects.
Yeah.
So there's maybe there's opportunities like that out there also for larger companies. But yeah, it really depends on the team, I think.
I think my answer was focused on full-time employees.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
Contracting is far more likely.
For sure.
That being said, finding that work as a contract, especially starting out,
it's going to be trickier
really
because
difficult.
Yeah, I mean, like especially like coming from my experience as a composer, like being freelance. Like I spent a year and a half trying to get hired by AAA studios right out of college, and that didn't work. But like it's a thing where like so many for contract things like. People have, like companies have either in-house or like the usual person they go to, right? They really build up those, especially for limited positions like a concept artist or a composer. Like people, they build up those relationships and they go with someone that they know can deliver, especially for a contract. So for concept art, for music, like those sorts of things kind of need a lot of experience and a lot of sort of integration to be freelance along those lines.
And that's when the whole networking thing comes in handy. It's like being aware of people who are looking for work, and just having like a group of friends who are in touch with that kind of stuff is really, I'm not even going to say helpful, I'm going to almost say required when trying to find work like that.
But yeah, it's also like, if you build up a reputation as like this amazing artist that is just putting out their own work constantly, and like people want to bring you in to like do something, like that's definitely a situation where it's totally feasible to do that because you're also sort of generating your own work on the outside as well.
That's when having that blog to post to when your tweet goes viral is super helpful.
Yeah.
This is actually a particular question for you.
Yeah.
specifically. When you were composing for Guild Wars 2, by
Yeah.
the way, fantastic job.
Thank you.
Were you particularly the one that actually chose to compose that, to work with that game, or did they end up choosing you? And second part of that question, I know you said you grew up in Seattle. Did you ever consider working with other game developers like Valve or possibly even Nintendo?
Yeah. So, sorry. Did you want to
Okay,
repeat that
I
for
guess
the
let me repeat.
record?
Okay, let's see.
It's a lot of.
For
I've
Guild
got it,
Wars
but-
2,
Yeah.
right, did you choose to,
Did I choose to?
did you
work
choose
on
or
the
were you
game?
chosen?
Yeah. And did I consider working for other companies in
And
the
did
area?
you consider working for any
Yeah.
other companies in Seattle area?
Yeah. So my situation was really kind of unique and interesting because I kind of accidentally got into game design because I came out of college wanting to be a freelance composer. And I tried to reach out to companies like Valve, actually, and sent out demo reels and stuff, and nothing really worked out because no one knew who I was, and I wasn't good enough. I didn't have enough experience to really to get contracts like that. So I ended up working at Nintendo as a tester. I started off as a contract tester and worked for about 2.5 years there. They don't do any in-house development, so that wasn't an option for doing any sort of music there. But then I worked at Warner Brothers Games doing QA as well, and then eventually at ArenaNet as a tester. So I was working on Guild Wars 2 as QA to start. And then a design position opened up, and I was like, well, I could probably do this. And so I put together an application and got hired for that. And then through my experiences working as a designer, I got to know the team, and I got to know the audio team. And it was kind of like one of those things where I was writing a whole lot of music on my own, and an opportunity came up to do something for a design I was working on. And I talked to the audio team and was like, here, I did this thing. And they're like, this is really cool. And that just kind of happened from there. So it was really kind of this natural progression of just being kind of in a situation where I could be open to being flexible with my career and my position at that company. And so it happened by being there and being able to work on that series. And then it just kind of, the relationship just, developed from there. And so, it's
kind of like networking within the company.
It is, yeah. And, it's a situation where I don't think that's not going to be something you can intentionally do.
Right.
And if you told me that I was going to do that, when I started getting into QA, that wasn't an intended path, right? But a lot of careers through the industry kind of happen through the people you meet and the experience, the opportunities that come up because of the people that you meet, and being able to be flexible and put yourself in different positions, and just kind of going with what works and what you do well.
Yeah, getting your foot in the door and seeing the team from the inside and understanding how it all works and how it all comes together is vitally important, both in terms of moving out of that job that you came in at, and also just understanding the industry and development as a whole. I kind of did the same thing. I started off as a GM, and I was just in a huge room with 100 other people all just answering petitions, and eventually at the time I was going to school for computer science, and I started talking to programmers, and I was asking them how they got here and what they did. And it turned out after talking to people that I realized I didn't want to be a programmer, I wanted to be a designer. And after talking to the designers, they all, at the time, this was 1999, 2000, there wasn't really school to go to be a designer. It was all on-the-job training. So I really lucked out in that regard, because that was my path as well. It was getting my foot in the door and then moving around inside a company. And then from there, once you have the experience, you can go somewhere else if you want to.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll do both. Okay. Richard, Richard, you're fine. You ask.
So what about talking to the programmer that made you not want to be one?
Okay, so what about talking to a programmer that made you not want to be one? Okay.
So at this company, mostly the programmers were implementing other people's designs. It was mostly the designers would come up with the ideas, and they would kind of talk about how to do all this, and the programmers were really mostly just implementing. And they definitely had a lot of choice in how they implemented stuff, and the first pass of it was always the programmer. But I was more intrigued with the underlying system of the game, and not necessarily the underlying system of the program. And that's when I shifted focus, was when I realized that the programmers weren't the ones holding all the cards. They were the ones holding. They almost, in specific cases, they felt more I don't want to disparage any programmers, because you can't make a game without programming. But in some cases, it felt like they were just implementing and kind of gatekeeping, and there was an unhealthy relationship in that specific case. That's not how it should be. But it definitely helped me change direction and find something that I was a little bit more passionate about.
Is there anything in particular when you start a new project that you look for?
For me, that kind of starts from someone reaching out and being like, hey, do you want to do music for this game? And I start, getting more information about it. And I think there's kind of two main things that I look for when I'm deciding to start on a project or go ahead and start on something. One is like, does it mesh well with like the kind of games that I like to play and to make? Is it something that I would enjoy? And I think pretty much every game that I have worked on at this point is like definitely something that I would have wanted to be a part of if I played it. And the second one is, do I integrate well with the team? For sure. And there's a number of projects where like it's kind of, especially with a contract perspective, like they've come to me and being like, we want you to do this music for this game, not necessarily to be a part of the team, but to do music for something, and I can't do that. Like that's not something that meshes well with me. And so I like, whenever I have a prospective project that I'm working on, like I want to be a part of that team. Like I want to be, because I have a lot of perspective to give, and so I want to be able to be in like a chat and discuss the game design as well as just here's music for it. So those are the sort of two main important things for me.
I totally agree, yeah.
Yeah.
Who you're working with
Yeah.
is super important because you're going to be dealing with them a lot.
Yeah.
And you want to work with somebody that you don't butt heads with, that you respect in whatever their field is. And then, yeah, the end product, like what are you making? Is it something that you personally would enjoy? Like it's a lot easier to be really motivated to work when the thing you're working on is something that excites you. Those are definitely like probably the only things I care about when starting a new project. Unless you meant like starting a new project from scratch.
I was at like a follow-up question on the
Yeah.
how do you have any tips on like creating that culture for a project?
You want to repeat?
So creating a culture for a new project.
Right.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
doing with those tips in mind.
Yeah.
Like creating a culture in that project, and like those are
Mhm.
what you look for in like in that.
So yeah, I guess for me, it's like, one, be a good person, be someone that other people would want to work with, and don't close yourself off from feedback from everyone, no matter who they are on the team. And then also, actually, the second one was actually my second point, which is, be able to have the whole team be contributing to the project. Like it's, everyone's working on the same thing. So if you're just automatically closing off feedback from someone just because they're doing art or something, or they're, just testing, or, even being a producer on a project, like if you close that off, then you're closing them off from the sort of sense of being a part of that project. So just, being a good person and being inclusive, I think.
I think like finding the people in the first place is always a difficult thing to do. From like an indie perspective, it's like, it really comes back to networking. It comes back to like who you know and like how you can get in touch with somebody that either you see something that they do that you like, oh my gosh, this would work really well with this thing I'm doing. Like figuring out how to get in touch with that person, and then figuring out like if you could work well together. Really, yeah, like Lena was saying, like it's like be nice and make friends, and hopefully you guys can all make cool stuff together.
One thing that it was definitely something that I took away from working on Celeste, that was like really stuck with me, I think, was we were working on a game that was done by someone that used to work alone, right? Matt used to just do sort of his own games. He did like Jumper and all these other games. So it was just like, this is all a solo production, right? And so one thing that surprised me and I thought was really cool about how he included other people in the project was essentially bringing in people that he trusted could do something amazing and not directing them too much. And so, he gave sort of the general outline of like, here's what this kind of should be. But then the people that he brought on, he trusted enough to be like, when they made something really cool, then that was it, right? That was the best work that they could do, and he trusted them to do that best work. And I think that goes to a lot of different projects. Like for my solo game that I'm working on, like I brought on Mello over here, and then also an artist, Data Erase, and she did just amazing artwork, and I was just like, gave a sort of a framework and just wanted to let her play within that space. And so, that was definitely something that I took away from that project as, my own sort of tips and being my, a director on a project, I guess.
Yeah. Finding people that you can trust and then actually trusting them.
Yeah, exactly. Follow through on it.
Yeah.
Side.
Down front.
Down front.
Hey.
Mellow.
What's one thing that everyone could go home and do from here that you maybe wish you had done earlier?
Okay, so one actual thing that everyone leaving here could go home and do that you wish you had done earlier.
Make something.
Yeah.
Like just whatever it is that you like, just do it.
Yeah.
It's really easy with all the tools that are out there and how everything is free now. Definitely, if you're looking to apply somewhere or to find other people to collaborate with, have something that you can point at that says like, I made this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, kind of like, write, make a list of like, these are the sort of the dream projects I would like to work on. And then like, if there's something you don't know, like just try to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
That's, how I got started with Escape was like, I've been a designer for 7 years. I don't know how to program. And then I loaded up Game Maker Studio and I was like, oh, no, I do know how to program because I've been scripting for like 7 years. So like, learning how to program when I actually kind of knew that already was like, that opened so many doors for me. And so if you are uncomfortable with something, just try to do it and, surprise yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the way I learn best personally is like when I have an end goal in mind, like I'm trying to do this and then I hit a wall and then I end up on Stack Overflow for 9 hours trying to figure out how to make that damn thing work.
Yeah.
But yeah.
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 You mentioned starting out with those tools, reaching out to just those tools that are out there. So maybe you like somebody who maybe there's a lot of college students who are maybe still in high school or moving forward in this field of graphic development or beginning design music. So what would you recommend? Maybe a couple of things that they can look into doing so.
So a recommendation for tools that would be accessible, hopefully not super expensive, and that would get you started.
Unity or Unreal, they both work great.
you can-
Blender is for 3D modeling and it's free. I don't know much music composition stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of, so digital audio workstation is the DAW, is the term to build, audio and things. And there's a number of, like, Reaper is one that's really good that you can get a free trial version that's fully functional. You can just start doing stuff in. There's a number of free VSTs, virtual, it's something instrument?
Virtual software technology instrument.
Yeah, there you go. Virtual software technology instrument. VSTs. Those are basically, software synths and samplers and all that. There's a number of free ones you can get out there. You can get Contact Player, and they have a number of different sort of sound patches, basically, that you can play around with. And it just gets, start messing around with audio.
I feel like once you have a starting point, like if you load up Unity or Unreal, you'll very quickly be like, how do I do this? And then just Google exactly that. Like, how do I do that? And somebody
Google a
else has probably done
function.
it.
That's how I did like Game Maker stuff was. And if you want to do like 2D stuff, like Game Maker is really easy to just get in there and like make a simple map and like drop in some pixel art and like, or do pixel art in the tool and stuff and just, whatever. It doesn't have to look amazing. Just, do something in there. Just Google like a function or anything and you have, all the help you need. And if you're, having trouble, like there's a community of people out there that would love to help. So.
Also, if there's aspects that you don't want to deal with, if you just want to focus on programming, you can get free art assets that you can drop in.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them out
Yeah,
there.
Unity Store is really good for just getting just something to work with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool, just like asset packs that you're not going to make, your debut game using those asset packs, right?
Right.
Because that's, you want to have a unique style for it if you're, putting it out there. But like if you just want to mess around, if you just want to like do something.
Or just for prototyping to
Yeah,
see if your
prototype
idea
something.
works at
Yeah,
all.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just get that stuff and try it out.
Mhm.
What have you guys been playing lately?
So what have you been playing lately?
Lately.
I just spent a lot of time on Minute.
Oh man, it's really cool.
Yeah, I 100% of that game, and it's like the first game I've 100% in a while. Probably because it's so short. It's easy. It's easier to 100%.
Yeah.
That, and then the new Hearthstone expansion came out. I've been spending some time on that.
Nice. Oh, I've not played a whole lot of newer things because I've been like crunching on my own game. Well, not crunching, but
Working.
yeah, working. It feels like crunch, even though I'm being reasonable about it. But I'm just like I need to get it done. But I actually went back. I've been playing through Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns on my spare time, just going back. It's actually a really good game. It's like people shit on that series a lot, but no, I really like Lightning Returns. You should play it if you want like an interesting take on turn-based RPG system. And a very interesting like time-based mechanic like Majora's Mask. There's a lot of sort of timed quests and stuff. Anyways, I'm going to play God of War when I get back. It's what I'm going to look forward to playing.
Burnout, how do you deal with it? You're working on a project, you have a project, and you just get sick of it, and
Yeah.
every time you contemplate about it, you just kind of like get that sick feeling in your stomach. How do you deal with it? How do you...
Stop for a while. That's generally, it's like don't think about games. Just go out, take a hike, like do things that are not your usual rhythm. Sort of break your flow in a lot of ways. I definitely I dealt with burnout a lot coming off of working on the same game for 6 or 7 years. Or rather, like that kind of led to me wanting to seek other projects. And when I took the job at Ubisoft, I spent I quit early basically so that I could spend a couple months just decompressing, just writing, just doing some stuff that was not game design. It was not sort of music. It was just focusing on doing something else for a while. And then eventually I was just like, okay, actually I want to dig back into this again. So yeah, just kind of letting yourself reset a little bit.
Yeah, I've definitely dealt with burnout before. I wish I could have taken time off.
Yeah,
but
it's sometimes, it's very often not an option,
Yeah.
Especially if you're working at a big studio that was like, here's the next thing to work on.
Yeah. I tend to try and balance what work I have. Like this, generally when I'm burnt out, it's like there's something specific I don't want to work on.
Yeah.
It's just like this thing is taking forever and it's pissing me off and I'm freaking done with it.
Yeah.
So I'll try and like divide up the work with something I don't want to work on, but I have to work on,
Right.
with something that's like interesting to me. And I've definitely added features to games like that before, which don't ever tell a producer that. It's like you're ruining scope, but like just
Yeah.
to stay sane, just do a little something on the side, then go back
Yeah.
to what it is. That
Well, then sometimes that can just be more productive too, because like if you're burnt out on something and you're forcing yourself to work on it, like
Yeah.
it's going to take twice as long to do that. But if you break it up, if you
Yeah.
sort of disrupt that flow a bit, then you're
And
able to
set-
come back to
set
it.
milestones
Yeah.
as well, like
Yeah.
super small milestones. Like
For
I'm gonna
sure.
finish this function before I go to lunch. Like really small milestones.
Yeah.
And then it helps you kind of like keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah, take breaks whenever you can. Like whenever that's an option, I fully endorse that.
Yeah.
Maybe one more question? No.
Yes, I was wondering if you had any inspirations within your works, and if so, what were they?
What are your inspirations in your work?
Like direct game inspirations, I really think about the games that I grew up playing more than anything else. And for me, that was that was a lot of Nintendo games, and that was a lot of adventure games. Like I love like LucasArts, Tim Schafer games, and so I'll go back and I'll play them again and just be like, oh man, that was a really funny moment, or that puzzle was kind of wonky, but like I get what they were going for, and then it starts making me think about like different ways to solve problems. Or Nintendo's always just like a masterclass in design. You're like, oh man, everything just fit together so well, and kind of taking another look at games that you grew up playing from a perspective of a designer as opposed to from the perspective of a player.
Yeah. I think actually kind of similarly, I was going to say, like, I grew up with a whole bunch of JRPGs like Chrono Trigger and the Final Fantasy series and stuff, and just kind of going back to those soundtracks and not just looking at the soundtracks from the perspective of my nostalgia, but also sort of putting myself in the perspective of the composers back then and seeing their influences and kind of going, sort of going down the chain a bit. So like, with Yasunori Mitsuda, who did the Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross soundtracks, like looking at a lot of sort of like jazz fusion stuff and really just kind of getting into sort of like what was inspiring them as well. And because everyone has inspirations, and I love just like, sort of chasing that like chain of inspirations back and just seeing where it goes.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.